Hello and welcome to Recharge and Rise. I'm Emma Draycott, your host and founder of this experience, and I'm anxiety and burnout freedom therapist and hypnotherapist. And I'm so blessed today to be sharing a conversation with Monica. So she is a founder of retreats and also a membership for intentional living within motherhood. So I'll invite her to tell you a little bit more about it. But first of all, welcome, Monica. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
So I'd love to start with asking you what led you to be here today and doing what you do.
Oh man, that is a loaded question. Yeah, I mean, I will try to keep it concise because I know we don't want to keep the women listening to this on the line too long. But I have taken a journey to kind of just lean into being my truest self. And that's taken me from I'm a petroleum and natural gas engineer by education. I've had 13 years working for a giant energy company globally. I moved to the Middle East in my early 20s and then lived in sub-Saharan Africa and then found myself in Norway becoming a mother and just starting to really pivot my whole life when I stepped into motherhood and more like that feminine divine, that feminine power that a lot of us kind of lose when we take on these more masculine corporate type positions that we've kind of been conditioned to like believe that's like going to make us happy or successful. So since I became a mother in 2020, I've been kind of like unpacking all that, and that led me to becoming a founder of mother and child retreats while I was still working full time. So I started a business called Wanderwild Family Retreats, and we host retreats in the United States right now for mothers and children to just really get away from the busy schedules. We tend to really attract any mother who's interested in a holistic approach to wellness, and a lot of times very high powered women as well, like coming from myself where I'm in these high powered positions where you just like you need a break and you need time to really honor yourself and also like that connection with your child. So I've been doing that since 2021. And then just about a month ago, we created and shared with the world something we've been working on earlier this year. We've created a space for intentional and intuitive motherhood that is a virtual community that doesn't have any boundaries, and really just allowing women to come and let go of expectations of feeling like we need to do it all. We need to do things a certain way. We need to listen to all the crowded information that's out there and just kind of be who we really feel like we want to be without judgment. Because at the end of the day, and this is something I'm still learning, but at the end of the day, like it's your life. And if you have resentment, like, I mean, it's you have the ability to change, right? You have the ability to move. It's very uncomfortable a lot of times, but it's also completely worth it. So I actually just resigned from my engineering job in September. So I'm officially a stay-at-home mom right now, but also an entrepreneur, obviously, because I have two businesses that I've been growing while working full time. And I've had a second child in there. So, I completely know how it is to juggle babies, pregnancy, newborn life, entrepreneurship, the very high demanding corporate job, and everything, and just feel like you're drowning. And then also just to kind of let it all fall away and be like, okay, I'm going to lose this identity. So yeah, that's like me right now. and, and it's a lot, but yeah, you asked how I got here. So
Yeah,
that's how I
no,
got
that's
here.
really inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'd love to know, because you talk about the high pressured like corporate career that you've held, and then you talked about motherhood and femininity. So I'm assuming that you are indicating that it was like quite masculine energy in the corporate. And I'd love to know, how does it physically feel differently? Because there's going to be people that are listening that might well be functioning within that masculine energy that might not be aware of what that is like or what it actually feels like and what it can feel like. So could you share a bit of insights around that for us?
Absolutely. I love that question because yeah, there is kind of this like understanding in the corporate world that like we need to all be these like boss babe type things, you know, in quotes, like, and that means we need to be authoritative and demanding and um you know lead in a way that's a hierarchy and kind of almost like put others down, or you know, these kinds of things that are, I don't know if I should say like they're attached to the masculine, but like they're just a bit more authoritative and harsher sometimes. And, you know, I mentioned I was a petroleum and natural gas engineer. So I worked for a very big oil and gas company. We have diversified in some other energy sectors, but, you know, I was on oil rigs, like that was part of my job, and was many times the only woman in the room. So you have to really like put this like shell on you to gain respect. Like there's this kind of like, and I think a lot of us feel like that. It's like to gain respect with your male counterparts. And, you know, my company was doing a lot to try and get more females in the door and have more diversity in the workforce. But like for the most part, the figureheads are men. So if you want to step into that, you kind of feel like you have to embody like what they're doing. And it took me some time, years, I would say almost a decade, and becoming a mother was part of that, to start to understand like, wait, but I don't feel really good doing that. Like that doesn't actually feel me. Like I'm like just almost like putting like a costume on, you know, like to just be like someone else, because that's what I've kind of been like shown that should be the right way. But when I started to understand like, wait, feminine is actually really powerful. Like feminine is freaking incredible. I started finding that I was actually gaining so much more respect at work than my male counterparts, and was leading in a way that like was different and was seen. And like I had a very highly successful career when I, you know, during this whole time, even the masculine part, but like it almost seemed to like open up even more, because the feminine, we're nurturing. We like to allow others to speak and collaborate. We offer a space that is safe for others to bring in their opinions, and we create an environment that, um, you know, we're usually a little bit more like, we have humility, we have grace. Like when something's wrong, we'll admit it and we'll pivot, more than men, right? Where they can kind of say like, we're doing it this way. And because they don't want to admit maybe they're doing something wrong or they've made a mistake, they'll keep doing it that way, right? And I'm like being very like pigeonholed in the way I'm explaining this, but like in general, that feminine aspect, we are just more nurturing, collaborative, softer, um, more aware. I think we also are a lot more intuitive. We can feel the room out more, like we can build relationships and teams. And when you start to lean into all that, you understand like, wow, like we need so many more women in high powered positions. And like, how incredible, how much would the world change in business and just like even the way that we govern if we had more women leading with the feminine, and like not just women that are embodying masculine, women who are like, I'm doing this the feminine way. I'm doing this like the way that feels good to me, and like not being afraid to say, okay, I'm going to have humility, I'm going to have grace, I'm going to admit when I'm wrong, I'm going to be collaborative, I'm going to listen to others, I'm going to even out this hierarchy and make it feel more even. And and that's the feminine, and it's freaking incredible. It just like lights you up and your team up and everything you do when you learn to lead and do business in a way like that.
Yeah. How, thank you so much. Really insightful again. So, just wondering, how did you start that journey? Because I imagine it might not have felt so comfortable. And you mentioned about letting things like fall away. So,
Yeah.
when did you really start to notice, and the point where you was like, I imagine there was a point where you said, I can't continue to like put this mask on or act like this. I don't feel good. And maybe there was some sensations going on in your own body. And how did you then lead with the feminine?
Absolutely. Yeah. At some point, it just becomes undeniable. I think like your body starts to react like physically and emotionally, and you almost just like can't deny it. There were a couple of things when I was working in sub-Saharan Africa. I was managing um 36 countries at the time, like everything below the Sahara Desert. So it was a very high stress, demanding position. And I was like totally burned out. I was experiencing panic attacks and anxiety. And um, if you're listening to this and you are in that corporate world, um, a lot of us experience burnout at some point, right? Because we're just trying to climb and climb and climb that ladder, and we think it's gonna at some point make us happy. But like I think I started to realize like I'm climbing, 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 and like everything looks so good on paper, but like I feel like shit. Like I feel horrible. And I'm getting panic attacks. I'm like, what am I doing to myself? Like I was a newlywed, and my husband and I had barely spent any time with each other that year because I'd been traveling so much. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I have all this money sitting in my bank account, but I can't even enjoy it. Like I go on vacation 10 days a year or whatever it is, and then I'm still taking client calls and stuff. Like I never shut it off. So at some point I was just like, I think you have to get to that like burnout level where you just feel kind of horrible. It's like a Phoenix Rising type situation almost, where you're just like, I can't, why am I doing this? You start asking like what
Mm.
this is this isn't the dream that's been kind of built up in my head since I was a kid. Like you get the degree, you climb the ladder, you retire when you're 65 and you get the pension. But like what kind of life is that? Like if you're not really experiencing it and enjoying it. And then I started kind of just like pulling back and questioning and just starting to check in with myself more, be like more intentional with myself and not just go through the motions. I think that was the big change, was that like shift and just checking in with myself and what I needed versus like people pleasing or going through the motions of things that I thought I needed to do that would make others feel like I was a success.
It really sounds like that questioning. So reiterating for listeners as well, it's like that the questioning, the change in your body, the sensations your body was giving you feedback as well, wasn't it? I think this beautifully links to talk about intentional living. So can you tell us a little bit more about intentional living, what that means to you?
Yeah, so I love the word intentional. Um, and it can mean so many things, but I think like the foundations of it is that you kind of like take yourself off autopilot and you put yourself in that driver's seat and really take control of your life. You become responsible for what happens to you. And you don't just make up excuses like, well, okay, I've had this situation happen to me in this situation, because we're all here for a human experience. We're all here to go through some type of journey and probably a transformation and to grow and evolve. And that can be really difficult. Everyone's circumstances are different. Um, and, I'm not saying it's easy. It can be amazing. It can be easy. It can be really difficult. But whatever happens to you, it's like that intentional piece of I'm taking responsibility for what I'm going through and make the shifts. wake up every day and make decisions that feel good to you, like feel good to your soul without outside opinion getting into it. And it's so much easier to say this than do it, right? And I was talking with some women yesterday in circle, and we were talking about like even a friend like suggesting something for dinner and you want something else and you're kind of just like, oh, I'm just gonna go along with it. But it's like these little things that we do that's just um like not being afraid to advocate for yourself, to take up space, because at the end of the day, like it's just you that you have to answer to, not all these other outside things and the ego that get in the way. So for me, intentional living is taking yourself off autopilot, recognizing that there are no excuses for your circumstances. And that's a tough one. That could be really triggering for some people to not be the victim anymore, but just say, okay, this has happened to me. This is part of my story. And now what do I do with it? How do I move forward? And really just making decisions every day and for the long term that feel good to your soul and that are best for you. I mean, of course, for instance, me as a mother now, I have dependents, so I also think about them too, right? But I don't only think about them and not myself. Or I don't only do what makes my husband or my family unit happy and like put myself to the side, right? Because I'm just going to end up being resentful, and I'm just going to end up showing my children that like once you become a mom, like your story doesn't matter anymore. So like it's really important for me to show them that like I'm evolving, I'm growing, I take time for myself, I make mistakes, I'm emotional, like I go through all the human emotions and I'm me. And I think it's really important for them to just see that journey too, and not kind of try to put this like facade on. So yeah, so that's intentional living. That's what it means for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, the I find a lot when I work with women that they don't always know what they want. So even when I'm talking about goals or even smaller choices in their days to day, like what their dream day would be like, what intentional day would look like, and often they might not know. And I think that is because we're so used to, as women, taking care of other people, looking after other people, putting other people first, making sure that their needs are met. And kind of going along with things because we've been taught that we shouldn't really make a fuss, so we go along with these things. But one thing that I find is quite transformational is actually spending time with yourself. So that wisdom from within and actually what you really want, it does require you to ask and to be with yourself and to cut out a bit of that external noise. Like, for example, you made the example around dinner, because if you're not listening to yourself and you don't give yourself space to go, what do I want? Then you won't know because you're not in tune with that part. So I think this might lead us really nicely to talk about your soul wisdom. That's what you call it. So I'd love you to talk a bit more about what soul wisdom is.
Yeah, so I think for me, like manifesting can take a lot of forms. Like when we talk about, like we were just talking about intentional living and how to like make those changes and transformations in your life that can be really big. They can be really small, like you just touched on dinner, but they can also be really big. Like I left my corporate job a month ago, or I live in a foreign country as an expat and I have a beautiful life here, but like, I got here because I manifested this from my soul. So I wanted to kind of like touch on that because I think that manifesting, like wisdom and manifesting is thrown around a lot. Like you see it all over social media and on YouTube, and there's all these like meditations and things you can do. But like if you're not like attaching it to your soul, if it's like from the ego, from your head, it's a lot more difficult to make it happen. And it's also maybe not what you truly want. So for me, like soul manifesting, it starts in, and I'd like to kind of discuss like how I do it, like in 4 steps, because I think this could be really important for someone listening if they want to try and do this, because you don't need to like purchase anything fancy to do this. Like you can just start on your own at home. The first thing I always do is like start to have some like internal dialogue with myself about like what it is that I want to do. So I mentioned like when I lived in sub-Saharan Africa, I was physically experiencing a discomfort with like panic attacks and started discussing with myself internally like, okay, like I need a change. I need to go somewhere where the work-life balance is more in my favor, where I can spend more time in nature and ground down. I started kind of thinking about this in my head, like, okay, this is going to make me feel better. Um, and then, and that's really the first step, is to kind of like coming to like this realization of, okay, this is what I want. And like, it's for a sole purpose. Like, it's not because I want to look good for someone else or I want to have a lot of money in my bank account. It's like, that was going to make my soul feel better, was to have that specific goal in mind. So that's step one. And then step two is actually like visually putting it down. So like I would start writing words like ground, like a lot of times I like to get like this big A3 paper out, or anything that you have with some colored pencils, and or it could be a journal, but start writing like grounding, trees, like anything that comes to mind, presence, slower life, slower pace, like anything that comes up for you that like would relate to that manifestation. And again, not like, oh, getting 100 likes on Instagram because I took this cool photo. Like that's from the ego. Like that's not going to make you feel better. And I hope most of the people listening to this would not, or everyone listening to this would not think that. But like what I mean by soul manifesting is like, it feels good for you and no one else. And like, it has like part of your self awareness and self empowerment attached to it. So yeah, so like writing things down and like visually kind of like seeing things, like I might draw some mountains and trees. And for this specific example I was talking about of my transition from Africa to Norway, because I didn't choose to move to Norway, my company moved me there. So I started doing all this like manifestation, and then like the door opened for this opportunity. So, and that's what you'll see when you really live in a way like this. So that's step two, is to just start like visually doing something, writing, journaling, putting pictures, words together, and just like seeing it with your eyes, this thing that you want. And then the third thing is to start speaking it verbally to yourself. Like you could just have a conversation with yourself. You could do like a voice note on your phone. And then when you get brave, start sharing it with other people, start speaking it. I remember when I came up with the idea for the mother-child retreats that I created, like there's nothing like it in the Americas. Like we are the only business established until now, 4 years later, that's doing something like this. And at some point I got brave enough on a walk with my husband to like articulate, like, I'm going to do this, and like told him the whole thing. And then, 6 months later, he was there and he's like, wow, this is like exactly what you said you want it to be. So like, it's like putting that voice to it. And also start like saying it in a way that it's already happened or it is going to happen. So like when I was talking about the retreats, I was like, this is how it's going to be. Like I wasn't like, oh, maybe this might happen, I'm not sure. Like, no, take out all of those little like filler maybes. I don't know. I don't like any doubt that you can like put in your mind, get rid of that and throw it out the window. And just like everything should be, this is how it's going to unfold. This is what is going to happen. So like starting to verbally talk about it is step number 3, and use language that is it's definitely going to happen or has happened or is happening. Like always have that confidence behind it and get rid of any of those like doubtful words. And then step 4 is something that is continuous. Step 4 is really taking some of these resources that you might see out there if you're not comfortable with doing meditations or visualizations on your own, or you can also, if you're comfortable, do them on your own. But it's taking time aside. It could be every day, it could be once a week, however often you have time. Excuse me. And actually sitting down, being present, and visualizing these words and pictures, visualizing these verbal phrases that you've been saying to yourself, and really going a lot deeper into like a meditative state, where you're on a different level of consciousness and you can really just go deeper into these feelings. And that's like, I think like, yeah, that's where like a lot of the magic happens with manifesting, is to really like make that connection with your like higher inner self as well. So that's step 4. And the only thing I would say about this as well is like it doesn't always unfold like right away. Like I think a lot of us are in this like, oh, I do this one time and then like something is gonna like fly on my lap. Like nothing ever unfolds the way that like we want it to. And if you're a mother listening to this, like motherhood's like literally like the best example. Like things do not unfold in motherhood the way that we plan. We have like zero control most of the time. And that's like been such a huge lesson for me to just like let go a lot, and trust. But like that's exactly what you need to do. You also need to let go and you need to trust that it's going to happen when the timing is right. It's going to happen when the timing is right, and don't give up because it will happen. And like I am the best example. I like, and I'm not like afraid to explain this. Like I'm from a very small town in New Jersey in the States. My whole family lives in a 10-mile radius from each other. I ended up moving to the Middle East, working in the oil industry as a female, pretty much the only one, you know, at that time, 13 years ago. Ended up married. My husband is Saudi Arabian, like ended up living next to mountains and trees and water. And, you know, the timing of having my children here in this space and this move that I had the opportunity to, like all these different doors opening up here and there, the businesses that I've found to be able to create, the women I've drawn in to these communities that we have now are incredible and so aligned. Like all of that wasn't just kind of like, oh, I got lucky. Like I worked really hard to really like call this in, to call it in to my life. And then also just like let go and trusted that like it's gonna happen when the timing's right. Because I've experienced loss, I've experienced grief, I've experienced some really dark times where things felt like they were hopeless, but I never ever gave up. I always was like, things are going to change. Like I would just always say, you know, things are going to go in this way. So I just wanted to share that for anyone who might be at any stage in their own personal journey right now. But that's what soul manifesting is for me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think the element of like letting go and trust, because I think you know, if you already feel like life is a bit uncontrollable and things are happening to you and around you, they are really powerful to have acceptance, trust, and letting go. But how did you find you were able to physically do that even when you didn't necessarily have the evidence right there around you? So I'd love your insights on that.
Oh, how did I do that? I mean, man, sometimes you almost feel like you don't have another option. It's like, do I crawl in a hole and stay here forever, or do I just open myself up to being really raw and just understanding that the universe has a plan for me, I think that's like the biggest thing that I've come to realize is like, I didn't share this in the call yet, but like my daughter was in the ICU in a near-death experience earlier this year. And we spent a lot of time recovering from that. And I spent a lot of time mentally recovering from that because I saw all these terrifying things happen. And she just turned 4. She's so small. Um, so this happened right after she'd been 3 years old. And that was something that's like, you're so raw, you're so like broken down, but like you have to trust that like the universe has a plan for you and has your back. And there's a reason we're all here. Everyone is here for their own specific experience, their own specific journey. None of us are here in the same path. We're almost all like snowflakes. Like none of us are the same. And there's always a purpose and a reason why anything happens. And that's been like a big healing thing for me with trauma of any kind, like birth trauma, with experiencing loss with, family members, with experiencing this near-death experience with my daughter. It's always been like, okay, that's trauma. I'm identifying it, I'm observing it, I'm working through all those emotions, I'm feeling everything, but I'm not gonna let that define me. I'm gonna like take that and then I'm gonna go to the next thing. Like, what is this showing me? And that's that thing that happened earlier this year with my daughter, that situation. It opened me up more spiritually. I've had such a better realization of like not just my intuition. My intuition has been growing and growing and growing more as a mother and really stepping into that like womb space and the wisdom there. But also I've just been feeling way more connected to the spiritual world because of that like thinner layer between that spiritual world and the human world with these different like experiences that I've been having. So anyway, where I'm going with this is, yeah, I think to understand that the universe has your back and that there is a plan for you individually and that you individually matter, is just a huge game changer in healing and trusting and letting go, because no matter what you're going through, you probably are not going to always understand it. You're not always going to understand it. But it will make sense later when you look back at it. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, and it's trusting that, isn't it? Thank you so much for sharing that part of your experience. Again, it's really inspiring and shows that, that actually even in difficult times, really challenging times and traumatic times, how that trust and openness and the way that you approach that situation clearly supported you. So clearly not that it was easy, but this is how you still held on to that, because I think it can be easy to see like people's highlights in life and things can look like they're easy on the outside, can't they? But actually, so thank you so much for sharing, a really authentic experience that you've had. So, is there anything before we come to the end of our conversation, which has been lovely? Is there anything else that you would like to share before we finish today?
Yeah, I think we talked on this before we started recording, but just if you're interested in being part of a virtual community of mothers like that are intentional, that are leaning into the intuitive way of parenting and kind of letting go of the gurus, the influencers, all that information overload, if that seems like something you're interested in, if you want to learn more about intentional intuitive motherhood and just in general slowing down, being more present, we have some really incredible free resources on our website and our community. And I think you're going to link one of them here. It's Sacred Morning Rituals. So that's really beautiful to just start your day in a way that feels good to the soul, and be more intentional of how you move with your mind and body in the morning. So I'm excited for you to check that out if it calls to you, and poke around our community more if it feels right.
Thank you so much for sharing that gift. It literally sounds delightful. So it will be on the link below, along with how people can connect with you further. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you so much for being here, for having this beautiful conversation, and also to thank our guests as well, again, for being here, for sharing this experience with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma.
You're welcome. And then just before we finish, if you haven't already clicked the link to get my free gift to you. So my free gift to you is a 3-day experience where I share with you your freedom formula from anxiety and burnout. So be sure to check that out. And I will see you in another conversation. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Monica. So say bye for now.
Bye.